Welcome to the Tainan National University of the Arts. Do you want to introduce about yourself a little bit?
Yes, my name is Timothy Lovelace, and I teach collaborative piano at the University of Minnesota in the United States. I've been at the University of Minnesota for 11 and a half years now, and before that I taught at the University of Texas in Austin.
Do you want to introduce some of your musical background, where you started and?
Certainly. Like many pianists, I started taking piano from the time I was a young child, and I began playing chamber music when I was 13, and throughout high school I started to work with singers, and I did 3 degrees in applied piano, solo piano, but throughout those 3 degrees I played with a lot of instrumentalists and singers, and I also had an opportunity to work more on my collaborative piano skills at summer music festivals.
Oh, really? According to your musical background, and as I learned while I studied with you, I would know that you once wanted to do a conductor or a organ player.
Yes, actually the organ was my first love, believe it or not, and I think as a young child I was fascinated with all the different sounds that one could experiment with, but also the power of the instrument, because you could get a lot of noise out of it. The thing about playing the organ which most helped me as a collaborative pianist had to do with sight reading, because I sight read a lot of hymns, which are in 4 parts, and so I was working a lot on sight reading, both from a vertical standpoint and a horizontal standpoint.
I heard that it's really hard.
It can be, yes. So I think learning how to read that kind of 4-part writing helped me a lot as I started working on my sight reading.
So how about the conductor part?
I think I was attracted to conducting because of the repertoire more than anything else. Because I've worked a lot with singers, I've had opportunities to conduct opera, and of course all the different instruments in the orchestra can inspire us as pianists as we try to orchestrate it at the piano. I think also the work that I've done as a conductor, and there hasn't been a lot of it, but the work that I've done as a conductor has helped me in terms of conceiving orchestral rhythm, which is very important for us when we play reductions.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Is that your first time in Taiwan?
This is my first time in Taiwan.
To enjoy it so far?
Yes, it's beautiful, and I'm looking forward to the symposium. And this is only my 2nd time in Asia, so it's a pleasure to be here.
But I think according to your teaching career, I think you must know a lot of people in from different countries, and you must know a lot of Asian students as well. So do you have any interesting thoughts from do they have some different characteristics or something different from them?
I do have a lot of Asian students and some Taiwanese students, and in general I approach them in the same way that I approach all of my students, but because I do have so many Asian students, I'm especially interested both in their cultural backgrounds and in their musical backgrounds. And I think in terms of piano training, but also in terms of music theory, it's interesting to see what kinds of backgrounds my students have. Of course, training in music theory in the United States has changed a lot over the years, even from the time when I was a student, but it's interesting to see what my students bring to their education when they come to the University of Minnesota.
So do you have any particular suggestion to them?
Well, it's always interesting for me to see how, for example, Taiwanese, Chinese folk music intersect with the education that the students have received in Western classical music. But I think the one piece of advice that I would give a lot of my students from other countries is to, since they have to work on their sight reading skills a lot, since that's such an important part of being a collaborative pianist, I think it's important for them to make sure that they're comfortable with what we might call keyboard skills, so playing chords and arpeggios and scales.
Yeah, actually we didn't learn that chords and keyboard skills a lot. I think it's a lot different and it's a lot challenging for us, especially in this field.
Yes, I can understand that can be challenging, but it can be helpful, and it's like learning a language. You practice it a little bit and it gets better, and so learning keyboard skills, practicing sight reading, that sort of thing can help a lot as one tries to learn repertoire very quickly.
Yeah.
I think if someone can spend take a summer, a couple of months, and work on practicing sight reading and that sort of thing, the more that one feels comfortable sight reading, the easier it is to learn repertoire in a quick period of time. And of course, it's no substitute for spending time thinking about the music, but when we do have to learn music quickly, it helps if we can sight read quickly. Of course, it helps to listen to recordings, different recordings, just to get the music in our ears. I think also, especially if you're going to play orchestral reductions, it's important to know what to leave out, what to rewrite. We want bass and harmony and rhythm a lot of times, but not all of the intricate inner detail that sometimes we find in the scores of the reductions.
So in terms of the orchestral reduction, do you think it's necessary for us to copy all the sounds that we heard in the orchestra?
Yes, because maybe not 100% of the time, but first of all, it can be an inspiration to us as pianists to as we imitate different sounds from the orchestra, but it also helps the people we're working with, because if you're preparing, say, a violin concerto and you're playing the reduction in a way that sounds like a Tchaikovsky piano concerto, that might not be as helpful for the soloist as if we're focusing on the important aspects of the texture, the voicings, what they're actually going to hear the most, and also on what's going to support them the most as they play with the orchestra, which is often the bass.
Sure,
and
but
the harmony.
As we copy the whole orchestra, don't you think they will feel it's sometimes too loud for them, or sometimes they're just thinking about ask us to keep quiet all the time?
I think that most of the time, if they feel like we're too loud, it's because of the way that somebody has written the reduction in the score. Because it's really only in the tutis when the orchestra is really loud and full. Just to give an example, the beginning of the Dvorak cello concerto, when the cellist enters, the orchestration is quite transparent. We have soft tremolo strings with some pizzicato, a few woodwinds here and there, but the way the reduction is written, if we were to approach it in the same way we would a piano sonata, for example, we would play it a lot more full than the orchestration sounds when the cellist is playing with the orchestra. So I think sometimes the problem with volume and balance has to do with the way the reduction is. And so that's why it's important for us to know what the instrumentation is and how we can achieve that.
Sure. Do you have any further study need us to learn to differentiate between collaborative pianists or solo pianists?
Well, of course, people who call themselves solo pianists can collaborate with others, and some are more empathetic than others, and usually it's usually easy to train anybody to be a good ensemble player in terms of feeling a mutual pulse and breathing together and that sort of thing. I think the thing a solo pianist often doesn't get in an education has to do especially with a little bit with the orchestration, the reductions we just talked about, but also playing with singers and understanding not just singers' breathing, but understanding their diction, understanding their languages, and it's really crucial for us as pianists to understand the texts that we're playing and to understand the rhythm of those texts, the pacing of those texts, because that influences what we do in terms of our own pacing.
So I know it's very common, a lot of really professional collaborative pianists to go back to school to finish their doctoral degree. Do you think it's really necessary to finish the whole DMA degree, or you think it's more important to us to think about or emphasize on our practical experience?
Practical experience is crucial, and it can be a good education. And there are lots of ways that we can educate ourselves, and we have to do that for the rest of our lives. But a DMA degree is very concentrated. So the practical experience in the context of a DMA degree is very concentrated, and so I think in that sense it's the DMA degree is necessary, and especially if one is going to apply for an academic position, those credentials are important. You asked about advice for pianists from Taiwan who want to study collaborative piano, and I forgot one thing, and this is advice I would give everyone. A lot of people are really interested in playing vocal repertoire, and yes, I mean, of course, a lot of people are interested in playing instrumental repertoire as well, but the thing that's challenging and fun for all of us as collaborative pianists who play vocal repertoire has to do with the language itself. And it's really hard to learn a new language well and quickly in the context of a DMA degree at an American institution. So my one piece of advice for people who really want to learn vocal repertoire is go to another country for a summer and learn the language. If you're interested in Italian opera, go to Italy, study the language. If you're in love with German art song, go to Germany or Austria for the summer and really try to learn as much of the language as you can. Of course, there are a lot of things that we do intuitively, and we can do it intuitively, and of course you can do your own translations, you can study diction, you can get a sense of the rhythm of the text of any foreign language. But if you really want to learn it well, if you want to coach singers the best you can, it's good to try to find some sort of immersion program where you can learn the language really well. So, in fact, a few years ago I decided I wanted to learn Spanish, and I had studied French and German, but never Spanish, and so I went to Ecuador, where my wife is from, and I spent 3 weeks doing 4 hours a day of language study, and it was was like a shot in the arm. It really helped me a lot. And then I did it again in successive summers.
Do you have any other suggestion other than this courses questions and like piano skills or any technique that we should know like as a collaborative pianist?
One never stops learning. You just have to keep finding ways to educate yourselves. And I think these days with YouTube, it's really
Helpful.
It's really helpful. Really helpful. You can find master classes on anything, really. And so that's really helpful. I think it's one thing that for me has been important is I hear a lot of repertoire every week because people bring in all sorts of different pieces of music, and so once in a while I have to tell myself, okay, I'm going to study in depth this piece of music, or I'm going to study in depth this piece of music, whether I'm playing it myself or not, just so I can remind myself what it's like to study music on a deeper level and not just on a cursory level. And sometimes that happens to us as collaborative pianists. Everything is a work in progress.
Yeah.
We may spend a couple of weeks on one piece and then we have to move on to something else. But we'll come back to it in another point of our lives, and then hopefully we can make it more a part of ourselves than we did the previous time.
Yeah, we appreciate your questions and thank you again for being in the school, and wish you have like a pleasant journey. And
it's really a pleasure being here, and I'm looking forward to the symposium.
thank you.
Thank you.